The following is a presentation of the Force Center podcast feed.
From the center of the galaxy, this is the Force Center podcast feed, and this particular episode is the Andor Report.
Juicy too, biggie, squigglies.
Hey-ya! I was having such fun thinking about how this was going to go. Regular listeners know for our reports, our reviews, discussions of episodes, I'll say the blank report, and then Ken makes a fun noise, which means I get to guess right as we start the episode, what is it going to be? And I thought, it's either going to be some fun, weird pirate aliens or B2 emo crying. And I'm so happy that you chose.
I can't go aliens. There yet. Yeah, I can't go there yet. It's too sad. But Tusi too, that's my new favorite thing.
Tusi too, no biggie dinner tonight.
like pastimes, Freedy. And we have a new Star Wars swear word that I actually like. Sometimes Star Wars swear words bug me. I'd rather just like in Andor. Say the real word maybe. I know that why you can't. But scob the Empire. I like that one.
Hey, yeah, we saw we heard the actual Earth S word earlier in Andor, and now we're hearing the space S word of scob.
Yeah, scob and scobbin.
Scobbin Empire. I like that one because it's not trying too hard, right? To be look at us, new swear word, just slipping it right in there.
No offense to the dank Ferric and I love Ichuta too as well, but it's sometimes not my favorite thing. But scob the Empire, that's a good one.
Perhaps controversial, but for me, Ichuta, that's what all other Star Wars swear words are compared to.
Yes.
That's the baseline.
Yes.
Ichuta, very, very effective, very dirty, very mean. Anyway, on that note, I'm Joseph Scrimshaw.
I'm Ken Napzok, and we're swearing and talking about biggie dinners.
That's right. Biggie dinners by itself, if you say it fast, could maybe sound like a Star Wars swear. Anyway, we are very excited to be here discussing episode 11 of Andor. It is entitled Daughter of Ferrix, written by Tony Gilroy, directed by Benjamin Caron. It is about 36 minutes of actual story once you get past all the opening credits and the end credits as well, about 36 minutes of actual story. Ken, did it feel like 36 minutes? Did it feel shorter? Did it feel longer? What did it feel like this week to you?
I always actually love when you give those stats because, when you log in for the night and you're sitting down, you're like, how long am I going to be up for us here? We always talk about our West Coast privilege to watch this at midnight, which is not too late. But you're always like, and it's like, 46 minutes. And then you're right. Then it's like, well, actually only 36. I'll say this. It felt long. And sometimes it meandered for me, but then at the end of the day, it was like, I know this is going to be the last scene. I hear the music. I know what you're doing, Andor show. You got that music playing, which means it's ending, and it felt really short.
Yeah, no, I think I get lost in it, and because the Andor shows have a slightly different structure, right? They're not a really standard television episode structure, like even with Mandalorian, which I enjoy that each episode is a self-contained story while telling the bigger story of the season, right? You kind of know where he's at in the mission, how close he's gotten to fulfilling the quest of the week. So you have that a little bit of that sort of narrative metronome that you can check in easily with yourself. And since Andor doesn't always have that, it's a little bit more thematic. I get lost in like how many scenes have passed. In this episode, definitely, it was like, thematically, it's just a question of how long we're holding on Andor's face at the beach before the credits pop in for me. That was my only question. I knew we were at the end.
Literally was my thought. Yeah, all right, is he going to look out? Is he going to look back? Look down? Which one is it? Which one's the thumbnail? What is it?
Yeah, is he going to see a shore trooper and start running? I thought probably not. A little too comedic for Andor. We always like to set the scene, which we've already started doing a little bit, and share our experience of actually sitting down and watching the show. We like to do that because it's fun, because we're fans, because we have some rituals in the way we watch it, but also to just kind of take ownership of the fact that the way we watch it, what's going on in our lives, sometimes affects the way we absorb and interact with the show. So what was your scene. Set it for me there.
Setting the scene. It was a long day for me. That's key, right? I had to wake up early, get some X-rays at the hospital on the far side of the valley, then go to the other side of the northern LA County to write with my former writing partner Matt Keen. I are trying to no longer be former writing partners. We're trying to be writing partners again. So we're a long, nice, wonderful meeting. Long day, and I finally got some work done. Got a good workout in. I sat down. I was like, I'm going to relax, because I'm obsessed with Fortnite again, the video game that you think's for children, but really shouldn't be. And I ended up playing with our buddy Ken Plume, Force 5. Check out his show on YouTube. Joseph and I have been guests on there. Ken is great, and he's a great Fortnite player. And he sends me the invite on PlayStation. I was like, oh, yeah, okay. And he's both like, hey, so you're probably like me, waiting for Andor. I'm like, yeah. And, it's a fun game, but it's a violent, tense game. And I had my adrenaline pumping, and we both were like, all right, let's sign off and actually go be adults and watch Star Wars for podcast reasons. And man, I sat down like I'm ready for a fight with the Empire. My adrenaline was kind of like, yeah, here we go. All right, it's almost midnight. Let's do this. And these are the final 2 episodes, and I bet it's going to be straight fire. And it was a different kind of fire. It was a very emotional fire, which shouldn't be a surprise with Andor. So as we discuss overall reactions, I had a little bit of a letdown at first that I quickly had to process. Nothing to do with the show, all me. And part of it was Ken Plume, if you're listening, you and I just shotgun blasting opponents that got me too revved up. I'm not going to do that again. I have to calm down.
Yeah, like a kid running around in a circle in your footy jammies. Being like, okay, calm down. Night Court isn't that exciting. Calm down.
Larrickhead is, but Night Court not. Yeah.
Yeah, totally understandable. Yeah, it's been weird to kind of how do you emotionally prepare for Andor? I had joked about for myself. It was almost like, choosing which Sinatra album to listen to. Some of his are up and swinging, and some of them are like, hey, are you bummed out? Frank Sinatra will be bummed out with you. Trying to get myself into that headspace. Earlier in the day, I did listen to multiple bummer Frank Sinatra albums, which really helped. The later 80s or early 80s album, She Shot Me Down, which was a real bummer. Got me in the mood. But it's so interesting to know that the idea of hope and connection and family and where this story is going, that is baked into Andor. The creators know that's such a part of Star Wars and clearly respect that's a part of Star Wars. But sometimes it's like episodes of Andor are like, here is 99% grim pain with 1% of hope way off in the distance, right?
Yeah.
So calibrating yourself to have that experience, and I think a lot of people are struggling. It's a difficult time. There's a lot to be stressed about. I've got some stuff going on that is reminding me about the impermanence of life. And that we all only have so much time, all that kind of stuff. I'm fine, not to scare anybody. Just life stuff, and sometimes life swings around and reminds you of that truth that we all know more often, and life's been finding lots of ways to remind me. So going into the episode, trying to say, like, I'm okay if I don't find a lot of hope yet. And what kind of finale is this going to be? Is it going to be a big, fiery 2-part finale? Is it going to be, just pedal to the metal? Or is it going to continue to be what Andor has been, a little bit slower, a little bit more contemplative, all that kind of stuff? So I think I went in with the right mindset to enjoy it. I went in with a sort of a boxer's stance, guarding the parts of myself that are too emotionally vulnerable right now.
La la la, la 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 la.
Exactly. And then I did it to myself anyway, because I love having the fun ritual of thematically appropriate action figures. I got my Andor action figure, got my B2 emo action figure. Have fun taking a little picture of them. And then I tweeted that, oh, hey, I'm hoping for a big reunion for these two.
Not yet.
And after doing all that work all day to prepare myself emotionally for Andor, I set myself up to just be gut punched with my own tweet of not only do Andor and B2 Emo not reunite this episode, but B2 Emo is going to make you feel a lot of things. So I didn't know that.
I love these discussions as we start to look at even our overall reactions, but I think it is important. And I know some people might be like, hey, get to the review. And by the way, no one's ever actually tweeted or commented that to us, but maybe some people skip and get to the review. I think it's vitally important to, especially you and I as broadcasters and communicators, to state where our brains and souls and hearts are going into these episodes, particularly a show like Andor. Which there's a couple of, I've mentioned it. And I keep the example of House of the Dragon this past season, which was this very dark, somber show. And sometimes on Sunday night, you just sit down and you're like, I don't know if I really am ready for this, but I'm going to, and I watch it. I'm a fan. And same with Andor. The music starts playing and I'm like, all right, here we go. And so it's important to set the tone. And then also because I struggled with some of this episode in the first viewing, and then to be able to realize, hey, it's me, it's where I am or what's going on in the world. And I need to pull apart and engage with it in a different way, which also, how you are emotionally it's going to affect how you view the shows is my big point there. But I think I love these conversations. You're at a very interesting spot to start this episode.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will say this quickly, and we'll get into the review and the discussing. I recently rewatched Wrath of Khan, which is one of not only my favorite Star Trek movies, one of my favorite movies. I haven't watched it in a little while, and there was literally nothing different about the film. The film hasn't changed, nor has my, assessment of it. I can quote most of the movie with the movie, but just being in a different place in life.
Yeah.
Looking at impermanence, getting up to being about Kirk's age, that was a different experience watching that movie that I've watched over 20 times. And to me, that was just another reminder of we bring things, even though the stories, the movies are permanent, they're locked, right?
Yeah.
We bring different things to them every time. And I didn't discover anything I didn't know. It just hit me differently on that viewing because of where I am.
I love it. Yeah, one of my favorite songs is Youth is Wasted on the Young. There's a great line about, here I am, mid 44. And I remember when I actually was mid 44 and I was like, oh, I've been listening to this song for 20 years. Oh, this has something different. Now I'm well past it, but yeah. Gotcha.
Exactly. All right, so let's take a hyperspace and jump back to Star Wars and talk about our overall reactions to this episode. You said you did struggle with part of it. Talk to me about what you loved, what you struggled with. What was your big picture reaction?
Big picture, at the end of the day, this really hit, and I love this ending. Can't wait to discuss the ending. I thought it was actually one of the more hopeful endings in Andor, which says a lot. Wow. But man, at times I said earlier it meandered. I only mean by that it just took a slow stroll through, but quick little hits across. It cut back quicker to the scenes. There was, by the way, some great directing. The Vel and Clea scene, the blocking in that scene. How it was shot, amazing. One of my favorite scenes, and the way it was played, loved it. So I want everyone to realize I really did love this episode. It's definitely a Ken issue, not an Andor issue. Where it just was so somber. It just kept hitting me that my first view, and I did kind of pull out a little bit and was like, I'll see this again in the morning. But stuff went back in again. The ending I really got into. I love the aliens. I can't wait to discuss that scene. And that affected me in a different way because it was a different tone. And I think you and I might be aligned on that one there. So all that to say, this feels like an episode I'll be least looking forward to on rewatches, which isn't a bad thing. It just is what it is. The amount of times I've watched Game of Thrones season 1 through 8, start to finish, there's along the way, you start an episode and you're like, oh yeah, this one. Okay. It's real dark and violent. I'll eat a sandwich and watch it with one eye, and this episode kind of for me personally it's just so gut wrenching. I'll need to be careful of where I am when I watch it.
Yeah, no, that's totally understandable. I think that this episode was kind of, I don't know, special in a way. I think I was wondering about it's the 2-part finale. Is it heading into high gear? And emotionally, yes, but functionally, it was, a lot of moving the fascinating characters, but structurally the puzzle pieces on the board to set up the big, what would be in a movie, the big third act climax,
Right.
This is the all is lost moment at the end of the second act, launching us into the third act as everybody kind of figures out where is the fight going to happen, even functionally. Right.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised at what they did with Marva in a good way. I was shocked and then in great pain with B2 Emo. That scene is incredibly well done, obviously. But, you know, I felt like Marva had been set up to possibly be like, she's going to have some feudal, you know, throwing a can at the troopers and dying just like Clem did. And that's, you know, kind of the Andor motivation. But I feel like what the show is really, really trying to do is take things like that and go, how can we do the same idea emotionally, but approach it differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was pleasantly surprised that she passed, you know, of all of her various ailments. And you could get into a fun, long discussion about all of the sort of dominoes that fell. Would any of Cassian's choices changed any of that? I don't feel like the show's super interested in that. So to me, functionally, what it becomes about is the big epic finale, the final showdown of Andor season 1 is a wonderful, loving mother's funeral. And that's really powerful and really interesting. So even though it was sort of like, it wasn't a big fiery episode, it was setting up what the stakes are for the final episode, which is an emotional, physical, ideological showdown at a funeral, which you know, we can talk about more when we get into the big themes. But I was really affected by that. It functionally, that's what the episode was about.
Yeah, and you talk about like a little bit of an expectation switch, or what Gilroy and others from the staff have said. We want to always try to look at can we approach it differently, and I do think that's admirable, and it shows, and it works. There's a couple moments, what you're talking about, that we've seen in the trailer, but yet to see in the show. That my expectation of that has changed dramatically in a good way. And there was a moment, we'll talk with Luthen and Saw, from a trailer that now reads completely different to me than what I thought going in. And I do love that kind of stuff. And this episode did kind of have that vibe of going, all right, no, it's same emotions, like you said, same emotions, different beats.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think one of the other big picture things that I want to be sure to say is I think we'll talk about it in depth when we get into the themes and ideas at stake. But overall, this episode to me was just a devastating portrait of grief and loss, either actual loss or fear of loss or impending loss, or relationships right in front of you that are crumbling, but it's about loss, right? And that's probably what hit you while you were watching, that you know, after your Fortnite fervor, you weren't ready for
foaming at the mouth. Foaming at the mouth to fight.
Right. You know, you sit down for Star Wars, and B2 Emo's just like, you know, he passing you a tissue through the screen. But at the same time, this was in some ways, on the surface, the most similar to other Star Wars in terms of the ingredients that it used to tell that story of devastating grief and loss. We've got the aliens, at least the one is a Caridian, we'll talk more about as well, and their weird, fun speech pattern, which is reminiscent of many parts of Star Wars. There's a lot of the way characters talk in Clone Wars and Rebels animated series. There's some Jar Jar-isms almost in that. You know, it's not just the presence of aliens, it's the way that they communicated. We've got, you know, a lot of time spent on a cute droid with B2 Emo, the kind of character that, you know, sometimes is criticized for, like, oh, you got to have at least one thing they can sell a toy of, you know. But B2 Emo was, in some ways, the rock star of this episode. You know, and then on top of that, we have, you know, a lot of there's a lot of fun ships of like, oh, I know that ship, but we have a larger traditional Star Wars space battle, right? And this episode to me just really kind of brought to the forefront some of the discussions that have been happening in social media, and sometimes not discussions, sometimes just, you know, opinionated comments, sometimes snarky comments. But this episode for me drove home why I like some of the surface Star Wars stuff to be present in Star Wars. Is that I feel like Star Wars is always dealing with bigger ideas. Sometimes it goes out of its way to highlight them more or less to make sure you don't miss them. Sometimes they're kind of running in the background underneath the fun and the whimsy and the weirdness. Andor has been an exercise, and we are going to make sure that you know the stakes and that you feel them in your bones. But what I love about Star Wars is, yep, you can just say like, yeah, the aliens are surface stuff and they don't really need to be there. They could be human people, right? And yeah, the spaceship is fun, pew pew pew, whatever. But for me, what gives it its power and what makes Star Wars unique is it is processing huge ideas of grief and loss, and what cost are you willing to pay? Is there greater good an excuse for making morally poor decisions, or is it what has to be done? Huge, relevant questions. And to me, they become more powerful when they come through the eye of a sad droid. Or the weird speech patterns of, a big pasty, tech pirate guy, when it's life or death, but it's spaceships, it makes it all much more intriguing to me. And I think what it does is it has the feel that Star Wars has an idea that everyone and everything matters, right? And I think I feel that more when it's like, let's let a droid be sad. Let's let a droid carry the grief. It reminds you to not write off the surface level things as just surface. They're ideas and they mean something. And to me, letting B2 Emo carry the grief of this episode largely is a reminder to not judge things by the surface,
Yeah, a big well said, and I think more to say on it in terms of discussion around the show and ideas that have been put out there and things that are worth discussing about what makes Star Wars and what do we want, and this episode highlighted exactly what you're talking about. I had so much fun to smile on my face on these aliens, but then you rewatch the scene and listen to the words and see the words. I actually wrote down a lot of the words because I want to learn their speech patterns, but to see what was going on and how it relates. I don't know. I know what you mean. I can't maybe say it as well as you in this moment, but it's just, those moments popped. And again, from last night, like, whoa, that was a dark episode, to this morning, waking up early going, okay, yeah, I do want to see that. I rewatched some scenes 4 times, and it's like, it hit me. And the themes are there. It's always there. It's one of the things we preach there a lot. Whether it's Boba Fett on a Rancor or Andor simmering, the themes are there.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, to try to say it a little bit shorter, for me, one of the values of Star Wars is it has all these fun tensions, and one of the tensions is the absurd mixed with the deadly serious, with the profound. And I think that goes all the way back to Yoda in Empire Strikes Back, right? You meet the weird comedy Muppet, like fun, and then suddenly you're like, wait, did the comedy frog Muppet just drop devastating truth bombs? Did the comedy Muppet just scare the hell out of me?
Yeah.
And that's that. The surface has value because it's still delivering the same content, but it is changing it by coming through the mouth of a weird comedy frog.
You will be. You will be. Yeah, and I think sometimes, again, this is a discussion outside this episode. It becomes, I don't know, sometimes it seems arbitrary to me of what we accept. And I've dealt with that. A campaign against Jackson for years, and Kevin Scott maybe go, well, why do I accept a squid guy and not a rabbit guy? Let me look at what's going on with them.
Yeah. Well, one only other big picture thing I want to share is I have been rewatching Rebels because I've been wanting to, and then I kind of realized as watching it's like, oh yeah, this is the time frame of Andor. Perhaps over different fans have theories about the exact time overlap, but around the same time, and in particular, what's going on in season 1 of Rebels. Spoilers if you haven't watched Rebels. Is they are isolated and they're kept isolated by Fulcrum. They don't even know they're a cell, right?
Yeah.
So even though Rebels it's definitely written for a younger age, and it's got a lot of here's the jokes, here's the big fun action scene. The Empire seems less threatening compared to the way they're portrayed in Andor. There are all these differences, but they're essentially dealing with the same ideas. And in particular, having watched the first season of Rebels very recently in the last week and a half, it's really interesting and brought a lot more out in Andor, because at the core of it, one of the big things that I'm sure we're going to talk about it in our analysis of this episode is, what is what is the value of Luthen's approach, right? Luthen in Andor is anointing himself as the sort of the key figure, and he decides who knows what, right?
Yeah.
And it's pragmatic, but as we're seeing in this episode, it corrodes trust. It prevents bonds from being formed. It keeps people away from the people they love. And that exact idea is what's at stake in the climax of season 1 of Rebels. Ezra, risks everything to send a message out to the people when they're supposed to be keeping a low profile, Luthen style. And then Ezra insists on rescuing Canon when even Hera is like, nah, just it sucks, but it's for the greater good. It's for the greater good. We got to let him go. And they push past that and say no. And in response, the rebel group they're involved with go, you know what? You're right. Hope and connection are just as important as all of the pragmatic things. So in fact, let's come together. Let's be a bigger family. Let's take the risk and move toward unity. Having all of that on my mind, that was in a very different stylistic show on the surface. The same questions were at stake, and they have a different answer than what Luthen currently has. Really made me think about Andor and look at Andor in a not a different way, but focus on that big question of it. What is the true cost of Luthen's style of rebel management?
Yeah, what's something big there, and also on that in terms of general note, like I how I phrase it and how the tone and tone of my words can sometimes, I don't know, I approach it sometimes wrong. I think what you're saying there, a lot of times I've been like upset at some of Andor fans to be like, could you look at Rebels because it's the same stuff? But now I think I also want to acknowledge the celebratory angle of, isn't it so amazing and awesome and wonderful that Andor is doing the same things and it's all thematically connected? The positive approach to it there. So I'm glad you pointed that out because it's there.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff if you want to dig in from that perspective. And you can also watch Chopper make fart noises and be really cool. I'm really enjoying Chopper.
Yeah. He's a bit of an a-hole. Yeah, he's the opposite of B2 emo.
Yeah, I kind of want to keep B2 emo away from Chopper. I think Chopper might be a bad influence on B2 emo.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into this episode, the big themes, the ideas at stake in this particular episode, how they're advancing the overall ideas of Andor. Where did you go with this episode?
I started with the idea of the darkness around hope. This episode ends with just a pure moment of hope, a decision, a reason to keep going, a mandate to themselves and therefore the galaxy. I loved the ending. I really, really did. Even though I don't like beach sandals, which they both wore, loved that ending. But those clouds are overhead. And for me, and I think you've touched upon some of it, and yeah, you and I always sometimes come to the same spots, but maybe different catchphrases to get us there or different ways to get us there. I looked at this episode a lot of the true weight of your decisions. And I think Andor continues to do important work at looking at the commitment of these rebel heroes, the ones we grow up with, looking up to for great reason, but just pushing them and taking us to their breaking points. And they've all hit it. And how that heroic push onto morning is always, I don't know, just balancing on this razor's edge that could go either way. And I really felt it in this episode. I think that was at play here. And I've heard and seen a lot of descriptions of this episode already. And I think you even touched on a little bit too, to be clear, that this show is kind of, this episode, I should say, is a gathering of its breath before the final exhale. And yes, it absolutely is. I also thought this episode is the show crying alone in the shower, wondering why it should even go on. And I think this show has been very brave in a way to go, yeah, no, we're going to spend some time there again and again and again. And I think that there's great hope at the bottom of this episode's barrel, but also I felt it a little bit more. You said 99% and then 1% hope. I actually think it's really accurate. And I felt it more because of that. And there's so many things to get into about what I thought, the weight of your decisions. The big one I'll start with is this idea and the Marva death. I'm with you too. I was a little surprised, and then it worked for me that they showed that this death happened off screen. You have this wonderful actor, Fiona Shaw, that you could have given a big moment, but I think she already had it. Her final speech, that's love. Like that's going to stand as a great moment for her. She dies off camera, and to me, we don't see it, and we feel it through BT emo. But I really felt that was us feeling it like Cassian. and how some of his decisions, he didn't get to say goodbye. And that's part of what's going on with him and part of what's weighing on him and part of what a lot of these characters are dealing with. And you're right. Everyone's alone, separated, on the brink of loss. Cassian and Melshi are physically wrecked. Melshi starts this episode of I can't feel my arms. My arms can't work. And then he has that little moment, tell me they're gone. They're gone. And we know he climbs, right? It's just so like everyone, that was kind of the episode in a nutshell for me. Nothing's working. No one feels their arms, but they're going to climb. And there's a lot of little things about the cost, but that's where I started.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to look at it. I think I put a lot of the ideas you're talking about under this sort of idea of processing loss, because I think that the show in general has definitely asked, what's the cost? Is the cost worth it? And there's some very specific moments of that in this episode. But you're right that this is the sort of episode where it's almost like, people are looking at the thing that they have just lost or that they're about to lose or the choice that they made and just kind of staring at it and having a cry in the shower going, can I make my hands work? Can I keep going? What choice should I make? So I definitely agree with you in the big picture. One thing I wanted to talk about is from everything you said is where's Cassian is at the end, right? We've talked a lot about this sort of balance of the personal versus the ideological in this show of, when tracking the balance between the people you care about and caring about the cause. And does your care for individuals motivate you to join the cause? Do you become so obsessed with the cause that you kind of push away connection and start to lose some of your humanity, lose some of your soul? And I think that this episode, in being about like grief and loss, was driving home that the show is really about the people inside the causes, inside the ideology. We spend a bunch of time with freedom fighters, future freedom fighters, and even the struggling, angry ones who've kind of turned off, their emotions by choice. To all of them, we're kind of reminded of what their connections are and how much people matter to them. And I think we're also reminded in the few short scenes that we have with Imperials that to the Empire, people are resources. People are targets. People are obstacles. They're not friends. They're not inspirations. They're not hopes. They're not balms. They're just, resources. And that's part of what I was really fascinated by this whole episode being the sort of the setup for what I perceive will be the big final battle, which is a funeral. Something small and personal and real and heartbreaking becoming the intersection of war and conflict because of how callous the Empire is, because of how little they care about people, and even down to like this sort of deeply spiritual process of citizens of Ferrix, especially a proud daughter of Ferrix like Marva, being made a part of the infrastructure, a part of the wall, a part of what they make there with pride, right? Being bricked sounds strangely dismissive, but that's, the term they use. But to hear all that and be sort of moved by the picture of that culture, but we're hearing it from dismissive Imperials going, well, okay, gross, weird. Why? Okay.
Yeah. Walls. Yeah.
Well, okay, great. So I felt like that was a lot of kind of what was at stake of setting up that the personal and the big ideological cause are absolutely connected. And one of the big questions of this entire show to me has been Cassian's journey, that he clearly has a deep love of personal connection. And can he marry that with getting involved in the larger cause? Which brings me to wanting to talk about where he's at the end, right? Because we're reminded throughout this episode that functionally, plot-wise, Cassian is the pawn, right? Cassian is the catalyst. He's a pawn to these players. Luthen and the rebels, want to kill him, and/or Luthen maybe he's going to have a change of heart. Dedra and the Empire need him for the ISB to be successful. Cyril needs him to have self-worth.
Yeah.
He's a pawn to all these people. But Cassian is still driven by the personal in this episode. I think he's fighting to survive when he's, spurring Melchion to keep climbing, right? You got to ask yourself, like, why is he fighting to survive, so hard? In the end, kind of answers it of he's fighting that hard to survive to reach Marva, right? Yeah. I thought it was really important that he didn't just, he's taking a massive risk calling her, going back to like 10 feet from where he was arrested, hoping the short just have the day off, right? Yeah. Or they close the beaches for some reason. Maybe there's a space shark, to make this risky call to connect with Marva. But it really landed with me. The tell Marva I'm thinking about her is great. But then she'd be proud of me. I thought that was just like a huge line to say, like, hey, I was in this awful situation, and instead of just accepting it or just looking out for number one, I inspired people and I did something. She'd be proud of me.
Love what you say, because it takes my mind in two spots, and we'll start with the ending, and I had some notes on this as well, because again, I love this ending. I love Melchi's part in it. I love what Melchi's saying. I love the phone call. I love the no names, and then he uses the name of the guy's calling, which is fine. They probably know who he is. But Cassian, no names. Love all that. But yeah, that look on his face, I put down the idea of just, that in that moment is Cassian is losing one of the big reasons he's trying to go on, or has been trying to go on, right? You talk about getting back to Ferrex, even there, the concern, what he might have been doing, getting the money. So, Mom, we can get out of here. Perhaps at times it's fair to say it's the only reason, and that has changed. It is changing. And now this question of who is he fighting for? What did he survive for? What's his goal now? And I think you're right. This is where it kind of this intersection for me of Melchi having this wonderful, powerful realization of somebody's got to tell people what's happening back there. People have to know what's going on. People have to know about this. Cassian agrees, absolutely agrees. But we also know, you're right, the personal stakes, the fact that this, and we don't know this final episode yet. We've no screeners on our side, and I don't think they exist yet. So we're only kind of speculating what it is. But your point about the final confrontation in this season will be centered around something so personal, so spiritual, so important to the community of Ferrex, making this daughter of Ferrex literally part of their community. You're in the wall. Powerful. And how the Empire views it, and how that's going to be the center of action, possibly. That intersection that you've been tracking all through the season, Joseph, is right there. And it's right there in Cassian's eyes for me at the end of, I had this one reason or this one person, and I'm changing, and now she is gone. Where am I now in that? And what's the big picture? And then at the other side, the Empire being, let them have the funeral, because we'll be there. And that's what's at stake for the people of Ferrex, and that's what's at stake for the rebellion, the people.
Yeah, and I feel like it is setting up this possibility of a real emotional victory for Andor. Maybe a little bit of defiance from Ferrex, but I had been talked about last episode and wondering, like, in a different show, Ferrex, at least that town, would like free itself from the Empire, right?
Yes,
like,
yes,
that's not the vibe of the victory they're going to get here. That's not the Empire they're showing. They're not going to be like, Ferrex is a people,
yes,
not a city, and escaping a ship. There's not going to be like a happy ending for Ferrex, right? So, what is the victory condition? In this episode, kind of answered some of that of like, they're going to fight for the spirit of their community, for the soul of Marva, for their tradition, for what it means, right? I think this might be a victory where Cassian gets out, maybe absolutely no one else does, but the victory is they stood up as one and absolutely said, no, your perspective on this, the Empire, where we're just all resources and nothing matters but your cause and your ideology, that is wrong, and we deny it.
It's potentially huge. And I use the word potentially again, because we'll watch the episode and see what actually is said in there. But I think this is why this is this little curveball that I'm really enjoying. I think you're right. Another show, it would be, by the way, if they were just like, enough Empire, you're oppressing us, we're going to fight, that's fine. But that's kind of what we as Star Wars fans have been raised. No matter when you entered Star Wars, to look at the rebellion, but especially the original trilogy, it's always been different. I've always been hammering the gavel on the table of the Empire, or the rebels was more fractured, all those kind of things, and a lot of there's a lot of videos and podcasts out there from other people about that too. But to actually see it to go to this level, I'm really excited. excited for a funeral, which is weird to say, but that it's the different stakes. And that being at play while you're watching Luthen admit what you and I were kind of saying last week, or kind of wondering, not saying like it was fact, but wondering, what does Luthen do when he gets back on the Fondor? Yep, 30 men plus Krieger. Sounds good to me. And clearly that's not exactly what's going on. Then clearly on the other side, all this, Mothma, what she's weighing, and tears in her eyes. By the way, Genevieve O'Reilly just killing it. There's so many wonderful acting performances in the series, but we want to always make sure to highlight her because it's man, such an amazing, the moments she's getting out of tears and silence and jaw clenching, and just looks just amazing stuff. But anyways, I'm excited. Like I said, to what you're talking about, this intersection and how it has much more value than just a fight. We're going to fight because they're the stormtroopers and we're going to do it. To drill down on why and to make it so personal for this community. It's really powerful stuff.
Yeah. And it's about the community. It's going to be about all of these things of, do Dedra, does Cyril get anything of what they want, but it's also, this center on Cassian, right? Where, we started this whole show. All of this is set in motion by Cassian looking for connection, looking for his sister, right?
Yeah.
And in the process, he's lost Marva. It looks like the Bix he knew is mostly gone. He's heading towards a lot of potential loss, and that end is so fascinating because it seems like he's like kind of like, tell Marva I get it. Tell Marva. I can't just be looking out for number one. I can't just be looking out for my little group of people I love. She'd be proud of me, right?
Yeah.
And then he goes to Melshi, right? And I feel like there is some growth there because Melshi basically makes a more positive argument of the greater good, right? We have to split up because it's the highest risk, or is the highest likelihood of us getting the word out, right?
Yep. That's
that very Luthen saw the cause first, right? And it's the kind of thing that Cassian has spent the entire show pushing back on, right? Of going, nah. I got another warm and easy place we can go to.
Yeah.
But he lets go of Melshi, which he hasn't wanted to let go of people at all, right?
Yep.
And he kind of, after this, the most devastating news he could get, that Marva's gone, he doesn't even get to say goodbye. She'll never know to be proud of him. That it is, this is a weird way to say it. It's kind of a big boy moment for Cassian, right? To let Melshi go. And I think that's, to me, is a part of the power of the scene. Is obviously it's the pain of Marva, but he lets Melshi go for the greater good and is left alone again. Kind of the last thing that it seems like Cassian Andor wants. And, if that's not powerful enough, I mean, obviously people have lots of opinions on, Star Wars poetry and, things like Luthen saying, a sunrise I'll never see. And then, comparing that to all of the great sun moments we've seen in Star Wars.
Yeah.
But for me, it's sort of unavoidable to think here's Andor at the precipice of his sort of becoming a full-time freedom fighter, one would think, alone on a beach in desperate sadness. It's hard not to compare that to his end, where he is on a beach, but he has accomplished something, and he is very much not alone. That hug between him and Jyn is in their connection is one of the great successes of Rogue One. Yeah. So that added extra power to it of like, he made a better choice to not fight with Melshi and to let Melshi go for the greater good, but it's not I don't think it's what he wanted in that moment. And to see him alone and in pain, and it added more to knowing where he's going.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. And I see all those wonderful tweets, and I think all of them work for me. I am definitely a Star Wars poetry person. I think it's all there. I think sometimes some of the tweets I see, I'm like, it's there. It's there if you want it. And I think that's powerful enough. I would love to get some thoughts, when the season's over. Gilroy and his team, they love giving a good interview. Maybe we'll get some afterwards about this. I couldn't help but think of that moment. Couldn't help of a different kind of hug, a tragic hug, no doubt, with Jyn and him at the end. But you can't. It's the same shot almost, man. Looking out at the beach, it's beautiful. It's tragic. It's sad. And yes, I think you're so right. Big boy moment. Letting Melshi go. And Melshi, the greater good, but the greater good being so personal for him, right? Those names in the faces that probably didn't get off. By the way, I was waiting for someone to go, I got off, and Kino Loy's there, and they turn around. He's like, I'm here, and they all hug, and it's all great. Maybe next year. Maybe next season. But yeah, so it's powerful. I think, you and I both gravitated to this end because it was everything for me in this episode.
Yeah. And you were saying that the end is really, really hopeful for you. And I think I'm on the same page. It feels like Cassian, by saying she'd be proud of me, understands a little bit more of like, okay, Marvel wanted me to fight for the greater good, for the larger cause. And I'm doing that. Melshi is advocating that. And even though I'd rather not be alone, I say, yep, I know, you got to go. Here's a blaster, best of luck. I'm sitting here alone. But I still think we're left with a little bit of an emotional cliffhanger of he's probably going to go back for the funeral, right? Like functionally, almost it seems likely. But it still sets up this great question of like, is he back there for Marva, or is he back there, this intersection of for the cause, right? Is he making the right choice in the moment with Melshi? Or is he truly, truly hearing Melshi, right? Is he feeling it in his bones? Or, are we heading to the story that this season started with him looking for connection, looking for his sister? In the process of this season, he's lost Marva. I think he's lost Bix. I think he's going to lose almost everyone else, sadly. And is that going to be like an inspiring beat at the end of this of, I finally understand what Marva's been telling me. I need to fight for the greater good. Or is it going to be a little bit more of a somber, the Empire took everything and everyone I have. What else is there but to fight them?
I think that's possibly the path here. And I'll say the hope that I think it's all in Melshi. I think he's speaking of hope. And then I think you're very right. I don't think Andor's 100% there. I think he's mulling it all over. Right. Again, this big reason, at times the only reason, is now gone. And the way, again, talking about the weight of the decisions, I wasn't there for her. I didn't get to say goodbye. Could I have stopped it? We see the ramifications of Aldhani run through the entire show since the heist. Even Mothma here going, and then Aldhani. Damn it. So the weight of the decision. So I think you're right. I think he's Miller. I just loved Melshi starting this episode so broken, and then, getting, on till morning, but then this kind of the reason for it, and that kind of being the spark of rebellion. Everyone's got to know, and they got to know what we did there. We got to know what they were doing to the faces, the names. Also, who knows what we were building? And it synced up a little bit of the, I thought your best friend, Noah Jabel, I thought of him going, yes, Star, but everyone needs to know. And that's kind of a big hopeful moment for me in terms of the rebellion. But on the flip side is, Andor, how much is he still processing? And your thought of this episode is about processing loss. It's on his face there.
Yeah. And I love the acknowledgement that, hey, he's got a blaster, he's got money. He's also still got Nemik's manifesto, which is, I think, also one of the voices literally ringing in his ear, And if he's going to pump himself up on the way to the funeral by listening to the Nemik's podcast, it's a pre-recorded Rebellion podcast. So I wanted to talk about, you mentioned all of these great moments of the way different characters are processing loss. I'd love to kind of drill down on a couple of those scenes, because it sounds like we both love them. In the big picture, obviously multiple characters are grieving, suffering, weighing loss. I think it gives weight to this show wanting to be explicit about, hey, the Empire isn't just bad because we told you so and it's a good guy, bad guy story. It's because they create loss and pain and they don't value life. Here's a reminder. I thought that the scene with the fun, much wackier aliens was so powerful in the way I was rambling about at the top, because sometimes the most absurd thing delivering the most profound thing is extra moving to me. And I love that what the heart of that scene ultimately is those aliens are angry that the Empire kills everything. Kill anyone they would. Kill the water, kill the squigglies, care not a snod who they kill. Heya. So you can just laugh at the heya. You can go, that one's guts hanging out, and you can go make, weird cyberpunk jokes, whatever. You can stop at the surface. but what are they saying? And what does it mean to Andor? And I think to the character Andor, to the show Andor, to this episode of Andor, and I think that scene being in here so early on sets sets the stakes of loss. The Empire is loss, and look at all this loss that's coming because of them. And this great irony that the Empire's lack of respect for life is what saves Cassian from these aliens.
Yeah, I love this. No, I don't want to talk a lot about the scene. I think you and I had the same experience of writing down all the alien lines that we could because they're so funny. And it's really just Dewey, I believe, is the alien. Freedy is the cyberpunk there. He's fascinating. And so you have no biggie dinner tonight like past times, Freedy. That's very funny, and I'm going to use that a lot around the house here with my chihuahuas. But what does that speak? What does that speak about the Empire and what's going on? This is why you and I keep, I think, maybe at times preaching, sometimes trying not to fall short of preaching so it doesn't get annoying. The connection to Solo, of the connection of the Cloud Riders, the connection of all of them pulling their masks off and saying, this was us. The connection of Han going, Cyril used to be great industry, destroyed. My dad destroyed by it. And this is now I'm a scrum rat. This is what we keep saying. The analysis of the Empire is done. And this great line, always the Empire, hey, scob the Empire. They not be killing ye, nay today. And we talked about the Book of Boba Fett being a show about breaking the cycles, change, big things with Star Wars. It keeps showing up again and again. And you're right. It is the Empire that essentially saves Cassian and Melshi in this moment, because these pirate fisher folk just trying to get squigglies to survive are saying, not today. We can make a lot of money off you. How many portions? A lot of portions, but not today. Not today. Nay, today. I loved it, man. It was such a great scene on rewatch. It's such a powerful scene on rewatch with these wonderful Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy, Vogon Cousins kind of design that was bonkers and practical. I loved it.
Absolutely speaking out of a George Lucas dream of the way weird aliens should speak, right? Like they're kind of pirates, but they got their own weird turns of phrase and weird words, and easy to write off just on the surface as silly, but what they're saying has such depth. It's so powerful in the Star Wars tradition, and I love the connections you're making to a lot of the recent Star Wars storytelling. I think one of the hearts of the Obi-Wan Kenobi show is Kenobi's journey to redefine for himself what it means to be a Jedi, and what he really attaches to is it's to preserve life, right? And Obi-Wan Kenobi is shaking hands with this Caridian. Yeah, not today. Not. We're gonna value life today, not use it as disposable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll talk about it more in the favorite funny lines. It sounds like because some great ones. Other thoughts on that scene before we move on?
No. But I also like the transition was you had mentioned it. It's funny, but like Niamos, maybe it's now an off season, but it kind of seems the Empire's presence there and the arresting of all the locals has maybe dampened the tourist industry. Once again, the Empire affecting the galaxy.
Yeah. No, I if the videos don't already exist of Cassian saying we'll go somewhere warm and easy to smash cutting to all of his horrific experiences on that beach, if that doesn't already exist. For us to feel the pain of there's nowhere warm and easy when the Empire has its boot on the throat of the galaxy.
Nope. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'd love to just talk just a little bit about the B2 emo scenes, right? I think B2 emo is living up to his name in this episode.
Yeah, totally.
We finally got the emo, seeing the pain almost literally through his eyes. That he's in borderline denial at first, just gut-wrenching lines of I don't want to be alone, I want Marva. I mean, that's just like that is the bare bones pain of loss, right? Not being able to wrap your head around the fact that the person you want you can't have. They're not there. And for that to come from this fun silly droid is there's an extra power to it. But then I also thought like the continuing, it would be powerful if it was just like, let's grieve through the droid. But the fact that B2 Emo's kind of through line it does match Cassian of like, he really doesn't want to be alone, right? We see so much of his scenes are they're not just about grief; they're about kindness and connection, right? We've seen people be absolute, jerks to droids. Heroes of the saga have treated droids like crap, right? So
here's your back, 3PO.
Right, here's Brasso leaning down, being the anti-Han Solo in this moment, right?
Yeah.
Of coming up with the fact that giving B2 Emo something productive to do with the daughters of Ferrix, right? Brasso breaking down and going, okay, I'll sleep here because I don't want you to be alone, right?
Yeah.
It was devastating, but also hopeful in having kindness and connection and everybody matters themes in it.
Yeah, Brasso is a real one, man. Everyone's been, I think, everyone has a place in the heart for Brasso, and he's just wonderful. And I can't leave you here alone. She wouldn't want that, and it's even goes beyond just of honoring Marva, but it's seeing this ailing piece of equipment, right? This droid, and how Star Wars, and see, like you said, not just some characters making fun of 3PO. We've even joked Kenobi's relationship with droids has been different every time. It's there. It's real. Mando. I mean, look at that. Droids are pretty important part of Star Wars. And talk about surface things of Star Wars. Droids are there. B2E has been there from the start. Effective use, the way it was shot, that close up, the eye, the sound, the water, everything about it broke my heart, which is why it was a little hard at first.
Yeah, no, and it was heartbreaking, and then just Brasso being so kind, made it made it bearable. Yeah. I'd love to talk about the Mothma scene a little bit if you're up for that.
Yeah, well, and there's it's funny you mentioned that, because from the Brasso scene with BTMO, she's in stone now, she's on her way. We're talking about an old tradition. We're talking about maybe has some spiritual, religious sides to it. We don't know the whole story there on Ferrix, but I love the interplay and curious to get your thoughts on it too. But from some of the Brasso stuff, and it's not, I can't remember if it's a direct cut or anything, probably isn't, but you got these two things in place of here's one that in Ferrix is about transformation. It is about letting go. It is about saying goodbye. It is about remembering. It is about some sort of permanence, but it's a different view on it there. Then you got to immediately go to some of the Mothma stuff, which is fascinating. It begins with this customs, traditions. I'm calling the old gods and the new, to look across to Game of Thrones. I even wrote it down, the speech that was there, but the last tethered impermanence, and how, to me, I kind of looked at what the Empire does. It's safe and secure society adjacent. And the old ways and being tethered and permanent seems like something the Empire sure would love for us to believe and accept. It's kind of instead of the fear of the great other, it's the fear of the new normal. And I just thought it was the way they played against each other, whether super intentional or not. I don't know. Maybe that's just how I took it, but I love that. And I love that's what brought us into the Mothma stuff.
Yeah, no, I wrote down the whole chant because I was fascinated. Yielding and acceptance, safe in the braid of the old ways, true and steady and braided in trust. The old ways hold us, safe in the knot, in the binding. The old ways teach us, bound against the wind, tied to shore, tethered in permanence. I think you're exactly right to draw these two cultural traditions together, right? Because on the surface you could see some similarities, right? Tethered in permanence could become bricked in permanence, right? Finding comfort in a time of grief by holding on to what you believe in, what is sacred to you. That is what's going on in the burial traditions of Ferrix, right? These are the old ways. This is the symbolism. This is what it means. This is what we need to do to process loss. I think it's huge that we had one thing that the audience is, I think, because of everything else we've seen on Ferrix, we are encouraged to see this as a healthy, communal, spiritual process, this burial. And in contrast, this ancient Chandrilan chant we see through the eyes of Mothma and Vel, and we see it as terrifying, constricting, and it does call into the sort of the fine line of honestly just religion. I mean, we've had to kind of, with our discussion of Andor, rip the Band-Aid off about politics. I guess we're going down the greatest hits. Now I have to rip off the Band-Aid.
No one's going to invite us to a dinner table ever again.
Really, like, we'd like to come over and talk Star Wars, but only the politics and the religion. Anyone want to have us over for dinner? Like, yeah, that's absolutely what's going on. But I feel like it's to me unavoidable. I think it is dealing with when traditions that maybe started out as a way to bond a community, to give comfort, to structure beliefs, can become something that is imprisoning, that is rigid, right? And to me, the line I draw is with what Mothma has been going through and her huge question of what she needs to do, is that she clearly feels like and Vel as well, that these ancient ways are tied to being restricted, forced into marriage at a young age, not because of love, but because of tradition, maybe even because of money, and that it leads to an untold amount of pain. And here, what Mothma had fought to, what Mothma is trapped in, what Vel dodged, here's their next generation excited to bind herself by a tradition that they see as painful and restrictive.
Yeah, I even love Vel. Mothma says we did. Vel's like, you did. I got out of there fast.
I never did this chant. Yeah,
a lot about me they clearly didn't accept. Yeah, no, and not even a dance around. To me, it keeps in line with some of the questions, particularly in the prequels around the Jedi Order that you and I have been discussing. When it ain't necessarily the faith, it might be the structure around it that needs to be analyzed. I'm not even saying tossing it out. This isn't me saying, toss the Chandrillan ways out. It's just analyzing what it does, and analyze it in this time. This is a hot new trend on Coruscant by the youth of Chandrilla who are here. This is the TikTok of Coruscant. But think of the time that it is in, and the words might have had a different meaning. And there's some safety and security. It's a great lie to sell because we all do want that. And it's all a valuable thing to have. To hear Lita. And by the way, Lita's just doing her thing. I don't trust Lita, and now I don't trust her even more. But I thought it was more the way she was looking at her mom in the earlier episodes. Was she going to blow up the rebellion because she thinks Tay's a problem? But I don't know. I wrote down the words too because I want to analyze what they mean on the surface, what they might mean to these girls at the table with their braids just doing their thing, and what people who've been through it know they mean. And just mixing it all up and trying to figure out what this episode and maybe Star Wars itself says. I don't think this is a toss everything about it out. It's just analyze what it might be doing. Tethered impermanence was not a comforting phrase to me.
Nope. The old ways hold us. Holding can be comfort, right? Or it can be restriction. I had a professor in college who always said ideology was holding an idea and being held by an idea, and it can be comforting, but it can also be restricting. And to me, it's just without getting into any specific real world religion, it's just about hardcore fundamentalism, right? Of taking something that was designed to bring people together, designed to give comfort, designed to sort of lay out, here is what we believe, here is how we relate to each other, here's what we relate to the world, and turning it into something that is so rigid it is no longer actually giving comfort or connection. It is isolating. It makes you angry, it makes you think you're right and you don't question anything. I mean, that's the story of the Jedi in the prequels too, right? Yep. They have a religion, the Jedi, and one part of their religion is to always question and always look at things from a new perspective, and they became too rigid and they fell. They became too fundamentalist. And I think that's what's really fascinating about all of this to me is I feel like Mothma this whole scene is Mothma wrestling with the loss of her daughter.
Yeah.
And the loss of her daughter is happening on multiple levels. I feel like Mothma feels like she followed the traditions. She yielded in acceptance and tethered herself in permanence, got married as a child, moved to Coruscant, and is bringing up her daughter in a life and in a way that makes her daughter's sort of natural teenage dislike of a
Yeah.
parent turn into something really cold and awful.
Mhm.
And because of Mothma following that life path, she's raising her daughter on Coruscant in that line where, like, yeah, the old ways aren't popular on actual Chandrilla, but because my daughter is stuck in weird, hard to navigate, rich Coruscant,
Mm.
she's rebelling by looking for meaning in the past, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe
Yeah.
doesn't even realize the fire she's playing with what some of that stuff really means to other people. Like,
Mhm.
you're being a teenager, you're experimenting with your culture and your past, but you don't understand the depth of what that might mean. And then all of that is gone from, like, if it was in a different context, it would be like, ooh, these are fun ideas to play with. But it all funnels into Mothma does not want to save herself and a big chunk of the rebellion by giving her daughter away for marriage.
Mm.
But her daughter has now set herself of her own free will on a path that is embracing that rigid Chandrillan tradition, right?
Mhm.
That's the crux of the conversation where there's that great blocking where Vel's like, whoa, no.
Yeah.
It's one thing for her to be, experimenting with the old ways and saying the chant with some friends to try to feel connected to Chandrilla, to home. But you're not going to marry her off as a child, are you?
Right.
Because we both agree that's wrong. Vel and Mothma seem to be saying. So I was really fascinated how kind of all of it is about Mothma's fear of losing her daughter. But there's also that question of, like, have I already lost her? Who am I to tell her she doesn't?
Right.
I think that's a little bit where we're heading. I think Mothma thinks it's wrong to take this deal from Davos scumbag.
Mhm.
But is she going to rationalize it with, my daughter's going to do it anyway?
Yeah. Yeah, she wants to push past it, but right now maybe she feels she can't. Feels all of Mothma's choices have brought her here. You've kind of said it, even the one set in motion years ago, decades ago, even all to that moment. And I'm wondering too. Like, now it's a question: where does this end? This is the dangling thread, right? And I think you're right. Could go that way. Could go that way. Maybe.
Yeah. I don't know if they're going to end up on at the funeral, at the big party at the funeral, Mothma and Lita and Perrin,
Wedding.
But I do feel like this is Mothma's story for the season, and it does need to resolve in some way that with the lore of Star Wars means Mothma, escapes capture from the Empire in this question of, what is she going to lose in order to stay able to continue to fund the rebellion.
It would be sad if it's her daughter. Parent, I'm okay with, but no, absolutely there. And I even you talk about the blocking choices. I love the look of Mothma in the scene. We've seen her at work. This is definitely Mothma, maybe on a Friday night. I totally get that, but hair looser, a little more, not the senator look, the party look. We've seen a lot. We've seen high society Mothma. We've seen Senator Mothma. This is Mon at home. Little looser clothes, just kind of drinking, crying. Like, it was powerful. Again, Genevieve Varela's did such a great job. It was a different gear for the character, and it really you felt it. Like I said, loss processing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of like this. That this was sort of Mon Mothma as, the full wine mom stereotype, right? Of pounding back a space Pinot Noir while her daughter has an afternoon fundamentalism party and being like, oh man, okay. I mean, like, it's a joke for a reason. I know real life parents who are like, yeah, my kid's got this thing going that I'm not sure about. I'm worried about it. And I'm hanging out in the kitchen with a box of wine and worrying about it. It was very real. Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying the Empire is handing out leaflets or pamphlets to encourage all this in different cultures on Coruscant, but it definitely works to their advantage with what's going on right now. Buy into the new normal, hold on to the old ways, don't change. We got your back, and all that at stake going on. All that going on.
Yeah. So fascinated to see what position Mothma ends up in, because I do like that it was initially sort of set up as like, what line will Mothma cross? And now is it like, is Lita going to cross the line? And Mothma just has to accept that. Yeah.
I'm telling you that we might have one wedding and a funeral might be our ending here.
What if that's the title of the final episode of season 1 of Andor? One wedding and one funeral. So should we talk about Luthen and Saw?
Oh, can we? Yes.
Please, let's.
Please.
Yes. No, I'll throw this out there. I think I think in this question of, what are you willing to spend? What's the cost for the rebellion? Processing loss. I thought the scene was a real fascinating. Luthen and Saw circling one another, looking for help from one another to justify the sacrifice of 30 lives plus Krieger.
I was going to say plus Krieger. Plus Krieger. This scene was amazing. And again, talking about when I'm looking at this episode of your choices and the weight of them and having to understand that and maybe still having to commit to it and all the stuff with Luthen, but also just the energy. Man, the energy, even when Skarsgård's like, Tubes, he's my man. He's my man on the inside. Loved everything about too. And it's Tubes. And then you and I could do Luthen and Saw voices all day. Who else couldn't? We love doing our silly Star Wars voices, but I still Forrest Whitaker's choices of later life Saw. I'm always amazed of because it just means so much to me. Just the paranoia seeping through. How that's kind of what isolated him and ate him up. Him breaking down at the end, and then even leading to the final moment of I ain't running no more. I'm uncoupling the breathing device, the Rogue One stuff, the Jedi stuff. To get there, but just to hear that moment too, and I know I'm jumping around the conversation. You'll guide us through it here.
No, you're not at all.
I get so excited with Saw stuff because he just does so much, and just the broken voice, the kind of crazed look, and the feel, and the paranoia, him looking around. Who is it? I just love everything about what these two bring to these scenes in this show.
Yeah, and I love that it was your classic Saw paranoia connects so well with the way he treats Bodhi Rook, right? And even Tevik at the beginning of Rogue One saying Saw's right, it's all coming apart. You can't trust anybody. So it's great. Building blocks for that story of paranoia. But there was something different in this scene because, that's Saw paranoia and totally kind of understandable thing to be paranoid about. The way Luthen works spreads paranoia. But it also felt a little bit like Luthen was right that Saw was having a paranoia moment to evade the decision that Luthen claims he already made in his big, strong speech that we all loved to Lonnie, and is kind of trying to let himself off the hook a little bit by getting Saw to agree with him, right? And totally. Saw is evading, his paranoia episode is evading answering that question.
Absolutely. And I don't want to undercut. I think so many people took to Saul, to Luthen's speech last week. You and I did as well. I just think you and I had a little bit of suspicion of it. Not that Luthen's lying. I think Luthen's fully committed. I think he said those words, the shower speech that you brought up. He has practiced those words. I loved playing with it. I love that both of these two very key members and what's going on, two key participants in this rebellion, two arguably powerful men sitting there just kind of go, you say it, you say it, you say it, you say it. All right, you say it. Ah, man, what a dance.
Yeah, you validate this awful thing that we both know we want to do.
It's awful. And then even to see Krieger and that stuff with Bix, you see the guy. He looks like a video game. He looks like from Call of Duty. But, Bad Company. I love that game. Looks like someone from there. But yeah, you're right. Just like they lay it on the table. 30 men plus Krieger. And both, there's arguments, for what you're doing. I get it. I get both sides. And we don't quite yet know, right? I think it's left off the table what the decision was.
Yeah, you're saying a lot of smart things, but you got me distracted by the video game joke. That's really funny. I know I want to see that scene where they're like to poor devastated Bix, like, is this the contact? Like, and she's like, no, that's some guy from God of War. What are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
But yeah, we got to find our moments of hope as we talk about these devastating episodes or comedy, I guess. I loved everything about that scene. I do love Luthen's speech, but I think it is theatrical. I think it is something that he practiced, and I think it's something he wants to believe. He's pushing on himself so hard to be hardcore and to be like, I've done it. I've shut off all my feelings because I rationally believe, no connections. You use the enemy's tools against them. That's what's going to win this war. I'm willing to sacrifice my soul, and I believe it, right? And he's saying that because he wants to believe it. His actions often support it, but he's still wrestling with it, right? You know,
Yeah.
there's a scene where Mothma flies away in an earlier episode, and Clea's being real cold and hardcore, and he and his eyes cast down, and you see the pain. And now we see this. We jump from that theatrical, like amazing speech of, you know, shutting the door on Lonnie, not even giving him time to applaud his speech, right? And that's why it has to be done. That's why I'm doing it. No questions asked. And then here he is in front of Saw going, Saw says, "You think it's worth losing Krieger?" And Luthen says, "I did. I'm not sure right now."
Yeah, the great prophet Lady Gaga once saying, "Ain't it hard keeping it so hardcore?" And I think that's where Luthen's at right now.
It really is. And where the scene ends up going, right, is they do look at each other and go, "We got to be hardcore, right, bro?" And the other one's like, "Right, bro, we got to be hardcore."
Yes, bro.
Yes, bro. Yes,
hardcore.
We got hardcore, bro.
That's such And meanwhile, Krieger's over there like, all right, mission tomorrow. Great. We're going to have dinner after that. Anyone want to go to Red Robin when we're done? Cool.
Do you think we're going to see the absolute depressing annihilation of Krieger in the 30 Lives?
I hope so. Okay. But I also hope Krieger gets out and shows back up and is like, Saw, what the scob? And who's this guy? It's Luthen. You're Luthen? I thought you were the butler. Like,
Carabas, dang, ferret, scob, Ichuda.
I would absolutely love that. That's a different kind of show, but I think it could still possibly exist.
Yeah. That exchange at the end, you're right, which was in one of the trailers, we got to give up Krieger for the greater good. Call it what you will. Let's call it war. So it's a cool line, but it is also it Saw's less theatrical version of kind of what Luthen's speech means. Of like, it's war, which means that all other the greater good, winning the war, is more important than anything else.
Yeah, and that was the moment from the trailers that I mentioned, that one of the two that really plays different now. Because in that moment in the trailer, it's Saw, and even we talked about it because it still kind of holds true. Like, of course, that's how he kind of views this. That's kind of been the problem with it. He's rocket launching children, whatever the cause. He's dangerous. He's unhinged. He's against Mothma in a lot of ways. But now to have it Luthen, and then we knew Luthen was in the scene, but then to have it isn't it just play a lot different? Where Luthen's like, that's the truth. Where he's just like, I know we've been building to this, but now we're here. We're knocking on that door. Oh, and the power shifted to Saw, as crazy as that seems, of him just being like, I'll tell you what it is. You're sending 30 men plus Krieger to death. And that's what you're doing. And that's what maybe you should.
On a pragmatic level, maybe?
Yeah, that's what Saw asking. Yeah, Saw.
But I also think that there's this interesting connection to my favorite Star Wars character to hate, Noah Jabel, who doesn't the Death Star. This is nonsense, all that. But there is a little bit of an interesting connection here to me between that scene in Rogue One. This is about deciding to do something to allow something awful to happen. But they're both kind of decisions about inaction, right?
Yeah.
That there's an explicit question in Rogue One of like, why did we build an alliance to fight if we're not going to fight at the moment that, hey, the day is here? If we don't fight today, the fight's done. That's the question in Rogue One, almost explicitly, right?
Yeah.
And on one side, you can kind of see where Luthen and Saw are coming from of like, he's got this pragmatic argument of like, hey, if the ISB is cocky, we'll have an open field to do whatever we want. But then there's that point of like, Luthen, you did all this work to build this network and you cultivated this source and you don't want to throw them away. Okay, that makes sense. But what is the source for? The source has vital information to your cause, and you're not going to use what you've built in order to just keep what you've built. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, he's over here. I have a sunless mind, or whatever he says, to use the weapons of my enemy to destroy them. And I think Saw's kind of like, well, you got the weapons, sport. What are you going to do?
Yep. I think it just invites these interesting questions of of when you build a system with the intent to use it, but you're still not sure about using it. And in Rogue One, it's we've built this to fight. It's a triumphant moment that they decide to fight. And this is like the apparatus that Luthen built is more important to him than the people that the apparatus could protect.
Yes.
And he's built this all for the sake of freedom. The Empire takes people's freedom away. It takes their choices away. And one could have a long moral debate about it. He's kind of taken Krieger's choice away, right?
100%.
Because he's choosing. I was thinking about this last episode, and we didn't end up talking about it, with the contrast between what Luthen's speech and what Andor and Kino Loy and Melshi were doing at the prison. They were giving choice back to those prisoners. Kino Loy gave a speech and encouraged people to fight for freedom. And every single person who did chose that. And in contrast, Luthen's going on a speech of like, I've made this choice for Krieger and his people, and they're going to die.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that in service of creating a galaxy where people don't do that to each other anymore. Take away their choice.
Yeah, and none of this, what you and I are saying, is to vilify Luthen. It's just wonderful, deep questions talking about rebellion and resistance and how to fight. As if Kino Loy said, all right, so tomorrow they're killing level 2. We're going to let that happen because that's our window to get out. And is that worth it for us? Is it a great sacrifice for them with songs sing, their tales? And it's to weigh them against each other. And that was what was a lot of what was last week. You and I talked about the two different speeches, Kino and what Mon was going through as well. So yeah, I think that's a lot of what Saw's here for. Because again, I think the cheat is we know a little bit of where Saw ends up. We know what he's done. It's not addressed directly in the show. I've almost been waiting for Luthen to say, well, yeah, you've already, done horrible things. You've already, killed, citizens in your attacks. I don't expect that in terms of canon. I don't expect that to come, but it's just, yeah, I'd love to see him just an hour discussing this. My dinner with Saw.
Yeah. I think this is part of what, rewatching that first season of Rebels, particularly the climax of it, really got me thinking about of like, absolutely there is sacrifice in war. There's sacrifice in this story. Andor is going to go on to do a bunch of morally gray to awful things that he doesn't want to do in name of the greater good. Obviously, sometimes that's what happens. Sacrifice in violence happens in conflict, in war. But Luthen, it has such a perspective of kind of choosing who gets sacrificed.
Yes.
And everything at the end of Rebels hinges on Canon is choosing to let himself be captured. It's a sacrifice, but he gets to choose it. And I think, and then Ezra and the whole Rebels crew get to choose the risk than saying our connection to Canon is just as important as the greater good. And that action makes functionally Ahsoka and Bail basically go like, yep, that connection is, and the hope it's inspiring is worth the risk of being together and maybe making the greater good, a little bit under the microscope. But we'll make more noise because the noise is necessary for hope. And that's such a contrast to the way Luthen is running the rebellion. And there's a ton of moral gray area in a lot of things that Luthen is doing. But in the big picture, I feel like the show is kind of coming down on like, the Luthen perspective can't go on forever because it breeds paranoia. It breeds a lack of trust. If you're fighting to give people back choice, you can't keep taking their choices away. If you're fighting to create connection, you can't keep everybody, unconnected from the people that they love. It's not, you are going to fully become the thing that you're fighting. And I feel like we're heading towards Luthen built this network and he ain't going to make it. And Mothma's going to come in and she is going to run it with a little bit more of a sense of we have to keep connection in mind. We have to keep hope in mind. We have to keep choice in mind. Those things have to be just as important as the greater good, or why are we doing this?
Yeah. Again, imagine how more powerful it would be if you go to Krieger and his 30 men, and you go, hey, this might happen. Do you still want to do this? Yeah, we do. Because we might win, number one. Who cares if they know? We might win. We might take out this Spellhouse base, or we might die. Maybe that's the choice we're making. That's much more powerful to me, then you're at peace. Again, I'm not saying Luthen's touching a dark side energy, but he's out of balance. Now, he does have red lightsaber wing blades. Okay, well, and a kyber crystal. Ooh, maybe. That dark cape that shot last week, very Sith-like. All I'm saying is, you and I talk about balance. Death is natural. Sacrifice is natural. It's part of this rebellion, part of what's going on. Loss, this episode, processing loss. And here is Luthen pushing against that, going, no. This loss might. It's not as Krieger's death would not be natural to me at this point. And he's pushing out of balance. It's just a great question for the rebellion of how do you want to look at it and what's needed. And by the way, sometimes it is. I get it, and I think a lot of people glommed onto Luthen's speech in a great, powerful way, especially with real world ramifications. Kind of what you're talking about. Radis puts down that fist to fight. But to me, he puts down that fist to fight because there's this group of soldiers on this ship heading to Scarif, and we can't let them die alone.
Yeah. It's about connection, right?
Yeah.
And it's about hope and togetherness. It's still violence. It's still tragedy. It's still loss, but it is it's choice and it's connection and it's hope.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I love it. It's great. That's anytime Saw pops up, I get so excited because I don't have all the answers to Saw, and he's asking sometimes some tough questions.
No, and this was so great because Luthen and Saw are similar, but I feel like Luthen is slightly more self-aware Saw, and I think he's going like, Saw, you're make me feel better about this choice that I know I want to make, but don't feel great about,
Yeah, because even prior meetings, Luthen's got the great, you're fighting the people on the same side. Aren't you tired of that? So he's saying a lot of truths to Luthen. Or to Saw.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
He wants to bring the cells together. He's saying you need unity. You need to work together. Aren't you tired of fighting people who agree with you? Yeah. So he's definitely got some of that in mind.
And he clearly doesn't enjoy the idea. Maybe he and Krieger didn't get along at the bar, but he's clearly not enjoying the idea of them dying. But he can't. He's the greater good, personal, the intersection you've been talking about and tracking all through this show. So really coming to a head with Luthen.
And all the mistrust that Luthen is creating when Saw's first reaction is like, oh, that sucks for Krieger. Wait, you'd do this to me, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Great stuff. Obviously there's a lot more about loss with Vix being haunted by death, right? And not even knowing kind of how damaged she is, like obviously very damaged, but like that scene was left open-ended. Is she capable of lying? Is she even capable of speaking? Like that was a really haunting scene where I felt like very open-ended. I don't know if you had any thoughts on the Vix scene.
I just heroes at the breaking point and her being how broken is the question, but this is not a good scene. It's heart-wrenching. And again, talking about the weight of your decisions. It wasn't her decision. It wasn't her decision to be tortured like this, of course, but or to be captured. But everything about what she has done before and get involved and communicate with Luthen, that was her path, and it's led her to here, and it's a breaking point. And can you find hope in that? Can she survive this at all? It's one of my questions.
And exactly. I thought it was a really interesting, hanging question of, what is she want to say about Krieger, and is she even going to be able to? Go ahead. And sounds like you had a thought.
I wanted to mention, we're talking about heroes at the breaking point or weigh the decisions and this Luthen stuff. A little moment with Cinta, and we got the dueling spies, her serving the Imperial spy, great tension. I kept thinking, I was like, are they suddenly going to realize what's going on and they get into a fist fight in that bar or whatever? Like, what's going to happen there?
A little vibro blade shanking going on, yeah.
I kind of would like that. I like Cinta as a character a lot, but she has represented a lot, even with Vel being about the personal, her being about the cause. That's been very clear. It's been stated a few times. But her I could see it as a cover. I just want to be clear. I think it could just be words she's saying in the moment. But her watching Marva die and the Imperial spy, I didn't write down his name, but him going, someone died. She's like, it happens. Like, and what side she's fallen down on some of these big questions you and I are talking about.
Yeah, and how if she's locked in her mission of Andor's a threat, he needs to die for the greater good. The second I see him, he's gone, right? Gone. And I do still think there's a question of Luthen. Yeah, that fits into his greater good philosophy, but I don't think he's like, I fell in love with Cassian. He's like a second son, but I think there is a is that right? Or does he's a risk. He can see me. He can, identify me. but also he's got a lot of skills. Is he more valuable alive? Will Cinta and Clea turn on him if he's like, no, actually he needs to be saved,
Yeah. And you and I've said this before, so nothing new. Just this show definitely is dealing and living in the gray areas of Star Wars more than perhaps other properties, but it's still edging towards a big choice for a lot of these characters. And I think that's what you and I are always interested in. Yes, you can live in the gray area, but you can't stay there.
Yeah.
And Star Wars has got some thoughts on that.
Yeah. And that was the last thing for me about sort of processing the possibility of loss and the way you're saying it about characters at their breaking point. Clea has been very hardcore, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this episode, I felt like we got even more about like her absolute connection to Luthen, not just the idea of the cause, but Luthen, the human, right?
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a dust up between her and Vel, which is, about rules and orthodoxy, which, there's a lot of in this episode. But it is also like a little bit of like who has done more for him. There's a little bit of, who's on Luthen's, how many stars have you got from Luthen lately kind of battle. And then her she like, there's a great, exchange last episode of Clea didn't think that he should go to the meeting and like worried about this. And he's like, you're worried about everything. And that great coded conversation that Clea and Luthen are having about whether or not he needs to be present on Ferrix. And she's trying to say, no. And to me, that's practical. It's pragmatic. But just the way it's played feels like another moment where even this character who has been presented to us as all cause, ideology, rock hard, is afraid of losing Luthen on a personal level. It's not explicit. That's my interpretation in the way I felt the scene.
I could follow you on that. I think Clea, more than any other moments in the show, felt a little off balance, right? Little off kilter. Even some of the looks, the sideways looks, great scene. Again, love the blocking, just the way they shot it. Both of them kind of in the center, or to the right and left of their shots when they're talking, but not on the screen at the same time. Just a lot of beautiful little technical things that I thought really highlighted the tension. But yeah, I love the sideways looks where Val would kind of get her. She'd get Val. But I think it was a little bit of some ice melting around the glacier that the iceberg that Clea has been at times, and in ways that she probably needs to be for the cause. It's all not done with malicious intent by these characters; they're on the good side. But to analyze the true cost of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's what's great about it is this big ongoing Star Wars question of how you fight, and yes, there will be sacrifice. Yes, there will be pain. But how can you not lose your soul while fighting for a better day? And all these characters, I think, and everything they're wrestling with, to me, funnels into that question. And that it looks like will be answered at a large funeral.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
All right. Any other big picture thoughts before we take a break?
Yeah, some of it's going to show up in comedy, but I do think we're talking some themes and big picture stuff. Cyril, unhinged.
Oh, yeah.
This wild card of a cat here. I love this scene. It has some great comedy.
Amazing comedy. Yeah.
Amazing comedy. Good job, Gilroy. Well-written comedy there. But the fact that you get Cyril, this void, looking for this purpose, processing losses of his own career, whatever, status, dealing with shame. His mother, which is still a thing, only getting part of the information, or only getting the information that he wants to hear or needs to hear from his old work buddy, and the broken communication, and how that is definitely committing his soul to the actions he's about to take, whatever they are. Just everything about him is unhinged. It's unbalanced as well. And I just love the moment, love the comedy. I love all the stuff with his mother in a different kind of way. She's fantastic with it, without a doubt. Such an accomplished performer, so it makes sense. But to have Cyril in this moment, just a look on his eyes of just like, this is what I needed to hear. I've been waiting to be committed to this radicalization and this journey, and here it is. I got the information I needed, and you got Buddy over there going, "Yeah, no, no. What? Yeah, I am working. Thanks for asking."
Yeah, no, I mean, I think kind of different levels of broken communication has definitely been a theme throughout Andor, and there's a lot of that, in this episode about, when Vel and Mothma, which is like, that's great connection. Finally Mothma has somebody that she could be totally honest with, right?
Mhm.
But she says about Vel asks, "Is Luthen know all this?" And she's like, "Yes, no, not really. Who knows what he knows? You know."
Yeah.
Mothman and Lita's entirely broken relationship, that absolute daggers she shoots at her mom and then lovingly hugs Vel, you know,
Yeah.
and then the comedy and the meaning coming out of Cyril and Mosk's, early iPhone,
Yeah.
level connection dropping is that like that great idea of broken connection of
Yeah.
the inability to communicate effectively is going to lead people astray.
Absolutely.
Great stuff, which we will talk about more in comedy. But for now, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back with our discussion of episode 11 of Andor, Daughter of Ferrix. Back in a moment. And we are back to continue our discussion of episode 11 of Andor. We always like to talk about canon, action, moments of comedy and whimsy, and honestly, in my opinion, there was just a lot more of all of that than there has been in some of episodes of Andor. So we're going to go first to canon. There's some kind of fun, just surface level Star Wars things, and maybe they go beyond the surface. We'll talk about that a lot. But we got some ships we know. We have the TIE Reaper. Whooshing above Narkina, above Andor and Melshi as they hang on with their bloody limbs. And a thing called a TIE Reaper swoops over. TIE Reaper figures in Rogue One and some video games and all that. Ken, did you pump your fist to see a TIE Reaper?
I did. I thought it was. It's just the Rogue One connections obviously are there in so many ways, but it's. I know it's a favorite design of yours. It's just one of those underrated designs and one of those things that was new at one point, but just seemed like it had been there forever.
Yeah. I mean, the TIE Striker and the TIE Reaper, both of them having those look more sort of bat-like wings. Oh man, if I had the money, I would have a bunch of them hanging from my ceiling. Not in support of the Empire, but in support of how cool and awful and ominous they look. I love them. And then getting to our aliens that we love so much. So the main one, you wrote down his name. I think I failed to. The one who does more of the talking. What's his name, Ken?
It is. I gotta scroll. It is. There's Fetty and Dewey. Palmular are their names.
Okay, yeah. So you just said it. Fetty and Dewey.
Freedy, Freedi, and Dewey, Dewi, and Palmular, Pamlar. There you go. Perhaps a couple, perhaps relatives. I don't know.
Yeah, nice. So I looked up Dewey. He is a male Corellian. We see one a Corellian with Saw's partisans in Rogue One, so it's a design that harkens from Rogue One as well. According to the Visual Dictionary, the Corellian who's with Saw's partisans is Saisiad Ak.
Yes, it is.
But as we talked about before, the style of their speech patterns is the kind of thing that we've seen in animated series in particular, in Clone Wars and in Rogue One, at places in the prequels. I think like the Tuzi 2, that's a real like Jar Jarism to me. Like obviously it's not exactly, but it's in that flavor and style. How did you feel about that in the middle of serious, grounded Andor? We got a little bit more of some of this kind of more whimsical manner of expression.
So I have not gone on Twitter. I wanted to see where that landed with folks. I have not yet. So by the time this episode's released, maybe I'll take a swing when I'm having some lunch. But it stood out, right? Especially because of what you're led to believe this show is, which is all seriousness and grit and none of the silly Star Wars things. And that hasn't been true since episode 1 of this show. But this is definitely something more highlighted. I loved it. 2C2. I've been saying that to my chihuahuas already. You want 2C2 treats? I'll get you. The no biggie dinner tonight reminds me of brisky morning munching. Anyways, all of it is just, I didn't write down the other line I really loved. Damn it. But I don't know. It's fun, but it's powerful, and I like it better than I've always said. Even like Zev with a real world like Cockney accent or something. I don't know. It's not my favorite thing. Sometimes it grows on you. But this one, I just loved how it landed. And I loved how it played, and it was fun to see it in this show.
Yeah, no, I mean the Haya that it's just kind of world building that Lucas always spoke about being interested in. Of like that sounds like a Canadian like just something you that in a specific culture you repeat, right? And obviously the Gungan Jar Jar Oki Day is a little bit more silly, wacky, but it had that same, it kind of fulfilled that same sort of linguistic role to me, which I just really enjoyed because I like the absurd and the profound being mashed together in Star Wars, and it's, to me, this is a great example of, hey, it's fun when we recognize things. We're going to talk about things that we recognize, but it's not the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing thing for me. It's a stylistic choice. This builds the world, right? Knowing that they're these weird aliens who look like they would love Talk Like a Pirate Day on Twitter, have a specific way of speaking. They have a culture. It's tip of the iceberg storytelling.
Indeed.
Excellent. So we will talk about them more when we get to comedy. But of course, we got the Quad Jumper. A known ship. Upsettingly, the Quad Jumper's official title is the Tug B-13, also known as the Quadrajet Transfer Space Tug. Real upsetting. I get where it comes from, but I'm going to stick to Quad Jumper. Hey, did you see when Cassian and Melshi got into the Space Tug? No, upsetting. No.
Quad Jumper. That was great. I had a big smile on my face there.
Yeah.
Ray fans unite.
Yep. And hearing that it's old in this time, it gives you some context for how the ship was doing in Force Awakens.
Yep.
We had the ongoing tubes intrigue. We have a episode that we do every month for our patrons where we open a random page of a visual dictionary. This last month, we had done the Rogue One visual dictionary and opened to the page of Edrio and Benthink, and discovered a lot of things, including that they're both go by the handle tubes or two tubes, which, unless I've missed some clarification somewhere, we're thinking that this is probably Benthink, but we don't know which of the tubes it is, right?
Yeah, it's just based off the jacket, the necklace, and the weapon more than anything. Edrio more the pilot, Benthink more the sniper. So that's kind of where we're going there, but it's part of the fun. And again, love him there more off in the background. Love it.
Yeah, and like I said, maybe I missed some clarification somewhere of which egg mate it is, but it was fun. Another interesting Rogue One connection was one of the weirder characters who appears in Rogue One, which is Jin's prison mate, great alien, a Blutopian with a face full of tentacles. In the, I believe it's the novelization, either the novelization or Rebel Rising, the book where this character tells Jin every day, like, I'm going to kill you tomorrow. Just so you know. And then this character has this absolutely weird, twisted history where apparently none of the naming conventions that normally work for Star Wars, it all fell apart because that character has 3 names. Nail, Kennel, and Ulin Musters. And you read the Wikipedia, and it's like, Ulin Musters went by many aliases. Nail, Kennel. All of that is to say that in a Blutopian, maybe it's Nail, Kennel, Ulin, is now the resident of that hotel room that Cassian returns to.
I loved it. And I think you and I went to the same spot. I even have the Wikipedia page up, but it's, she's the good job, sleep well, most likely kill you in the morning character there with Jin. And I think it is the novelization. Love the names, love the and I even, it's the reason I brought up the Wikipedia page specifically is I wanted to see if that character is actually the same and credited as an appearance in Andor, not currently. But in my head, Ulan Moosters is there on the Amos. That is her. And she's going to get captured doing something bad, stupid. Or not. Maybe she didn't do anything. Maybe
but, maybe she's been in prison all these years up until Rogue One for doing nothing. Maybe she was just going to get some pizzos too. And then I think there's a lot of other little fun things, but the other big appearance is the Imperial ship that chases down Luthen And very handily, the onboard Fondor robot makes it so you don't have to go to Wikipedia and tells us exactly what it is. It's the Arrestor Cruiser Cantwell class. The background of that is it was an early design for the original Star Wars film made by designer Colin Cantwell that was revived by the art department working on Solo. It was planned to feature in larger ways in Solo, but just ended up in the Imperial ad on Corellia for enlistment. Do you have thoughts, feelings about that ship?
It's one of those things I just love that it's there. The rich history of it there as well, but it played really well. Love that sequence. Again, it was something we'd seen in the trailer, and there was a lot of Easter egg pointing to on that. But to see it in action, I thought it was such a great sequence. We'll talk about, but always fun, man.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really great. I love the combination of the old and the new in Star Wars, and I love the idea that you can kind of backfill. Like, we know Star Destroyers, but then what other kinds of ships might the Empire have? So there's something about it that, to see it in Andor, it looks so classic. The lighting on it, the color of it, it looks a lot like a Star Destroyer, and it evokes that. But it's fun to see on screen, live action. Also, like this incredibly different, fun design. So for me, it's a good mix of the old and the new.
Completely.
All right. Any other canon things jump out to you that you wanted to discuss?
The only one, it's show canon, Andor canon, the Nemik's manifesto returning. That's an Easter egg, folks.
I feel like more that's a setup for the future, possibly. Myself, I'm very curious about that. All right, let's move on to action then. There was some action in this. I really loved what I'm calling the wet net.
Yes.
It wasn't just that they were aliens and that their design was a little bit more whimsical and that they talked in this fun, interesting way while saying deep, important things. It was also that it wasn't just like they held them with blasters. They had weird, gobby, wet noodle, half-cooked macaroni nets. How did you feel about that?
Almost as if Sheila was like, I'm going to take notes on that. I love that. No, and what I loved about it too is the comedy of them, and because it's Melshi going, we're going to do this. I feel it. He says, I think his exact lines like, we're going to get out of here. I feel it. And Andor has to follow him, and they're sprinting, and it's dramatic, and just this like, capture of it was really funny.
It was really funny. It was really effectively done because I think Andor has leveled the stakes up where, if we didn't know that Melshi lived, you'd think like, well, he's going to be blown away.
Right.
He's going to run over a mine. That's the vibe. And instead to get caught in a comedy net was a fun surprise.
Love the comedy.
Yeah. So I think really the other big action sequence is what for Andor seems incredibly explosive space combat with Luthen. Before we get into that, were there any other action moments that you wanted to talk about?
No. I think this was pretty much the main event here. And man, what an event it was.
Yeah. Tell me your thoughts on it.
I absolutely loved it. I'd say this. The Fondor is now in the running for one of my favorite ships in Star Wars. Anytime we get that question, Mando and his space bus, I definitely love that. Definitely love the Razor Crest. I love my Y Wings. I love the V Wings, man. I love them all. This the Fondor, it's got that you could live here vibe, and it's a little more classier than the Razor Crest for me. It's a little less rugged. I really love the ship, and then to see it in action. You got Dave Collins there, the robot voice kind of guiding you through. You don't feel alone. And maybe not alone on the Falcon, definitely. You got a lot of droids in there, but just as a different vibe. And to see it in action and to shoot the way it shot, the countermeasures, even Grace and I both went, as we watched that. Luthen, by the way, so, we'll get to it, but yes, you can talk, we'll talk about the lightsaber wings, as I'm calling them, but his skills as a pilot, who he is, even Mothma at one point saying, who knows how mumuch he knows. The mystery around him, I don't think it's the point to the character. Mm-hmm. It's not a mystery box of Luthen, but if we ever get it, I'm just, and if it ever factors into the story, I'm so curious about who he was, where he got all these skills, where he got these toys, these wonderful toys. Loved everything about it. It's just fun to watch.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a possibility that we won't get the story, but I feel like, some event in his life, radicalized him, right? He's got a clock on it of when he decided to go all in, and there's that part of me is like, is he a rich guy who suffered a loss and would be an entirely different person if it weren't for the tyranny of the Empire, and that he spent 15 years locking his soul down, but also getting out his ship, taking piloting classes, and like it was really like I'm a soft rich guy, and I'm going to train myself to be hard in every way. I'm going to give myself these skills.
Yeah. We've asked too. We've asked that question: did he start upper crust and learn more about the lower crust, or vice versa? A little bit column A, column B. I just continue to be fascinated by him.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying about the Fondor, because I think this episode, this action scene was cool because it felt like the Fondor is this extension of him, right? It looks nice, but then when those wings come out, it looks kind of nasty, and it's full of surprises, and it's, Luthen's thought of everything. And the countermeasures action was really, really cool because it was the old and the new. We've seen the tractor beam before, right? But this was in a different context. The idea that he has specifically countermeasures for the tractor beam and just the tons of tiny explosives, right? Was a really cool thing, and made even better by the Captain Elk of the ship, right? Was a classic, just rigid, imperial. And I loved the way his response was a quiet no. It was just like he couldn't like process it. It wasn't like, it wasn't even rational. And it wasn't like oh no, and now this guy's going to escape, I'm going to lose my rank. It was just a sort of like on an emotional level, he was denying it. This wasn't happening, Yeah.
I almost wish Elk was a younger Moden Kennedy from Last Jedi. This is a different version of the of the last Grimace. I that was a great casting too. He looked like he was from 1977, and I mean the best way possible. Sometimes the Imperial officers, they're all great, but but like sometimes they're like they're trying to put some sideburns on a guy in 2022. He had the look of just someone who probably drove a Volkswagen van to set and wore a green lime jacket and went and shot. Went to set, went to Pinewood in 77, went and shot the scenes. Loved everything about him. Loved that sequence. I love the little defeat to the Empire and how they're always just so shocked.
Yep, that it's just destroying their entire organization of how the galaxy works in their mind by being resistant a little bit.
Yep. What's he doing? A whole craft?
Yeah.
It ties into all the stuff like Cassian's kind of been saying. They don't care. They don't have to care until you make them. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. The spinning space laser was also just like, well, that's cool, right? It's something different that we haven't seen. It was definitely a little bit more like cool. What's an awesome weird weapon we haven't seen on a ship before, and it got a little bit more into this sort of like it was still cool, and I was scared for Luthen and all that, but it was just sort of like that's awesome in a way that I think it is okay. That is one of the ingredients of Star Wars, and you decide how much you put of that ingredient in each dish, and Andor has it as much of that, so I welcome a little bit of that. Well, that was cool. Spice being thrown back in.
Totally.
I wanted to ask about the scene as a whole. We're talking about the action moments as cool moments, but I also want to be able to dive in. Why do you feel like that scene was there in the narrative? Like plot wise, we get it. The Empire is maybe aware that this is an area where partisans are operating, so it all makes logical sense. But when you're looking at this episode about loss, about making choices, about teeing up the big climax, why does Luthen almost get caught? Why is that important for us to see in this episode, in your mind?
Great question. I think my gut reactions, I go to kind of what even they're saying when they're starting the scene, like, hey, a lot of partisan activity in this area, a lot of pirates, smugglers, and Luthen trying to play it off as, thanks for the tip. Just meaning that the Empire is coming down hard, which is something Luthen's been saying from the beginning, right? We need them to come down hard. Oppression breeds rebellion. And here it's actually happening. And now the fight might be here, right? You have those countermeasures are being used. And this is what is at stake. And if you don't do them, or you don't find a way to fight back, you're trapped. And I'm not saying Luthen's suddenly going to be like, oh, now I get it, and change the way or commit to the way. But it just kind of, to me, was the purpose, because where he was leaving, the conversation he just had, they're right there. And maybe they weren't there before. Because remember, you also got Mothma saying, because of Aldhani, I'm on the brink of getting in trouble, and I wasn't prior to that. It's all changed. It's all here. Death Star. Yeah, and it's here.
I love that analysis that Luthen is. We get to see Luthen personally experience the escalation that he willfully caused.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the things that it kind of brought up in my mind is seeing Luthen in straightforward physical danger, right? He's going to be captured. Really drives home a lot of what's been going on with the plot that, Miro is pushing to find Luthen. That's what she wants. Cassian's a pawn, right? To get to Luthen, to get to access. We've also kind of been reminded that this whole episode that nobody else knows everything Luthen knows. Luthen is deciding who can be sacrificed. But what happens to the rebellion if Luthen is lost because he's siloed everything so much? No one. It seems like maybe not even Clea knows everything that Luthen knows. So seeing him be vulnerable, particularly in the penultimate episode, to me it raised this question in my mind of Luthen has been clear that everybody is on the table to be sacrificed for the greater good, for the rebellion. And he's trying to protect himself because he's the holder of all the information. So I'm curious if something's going to come where he is discovered, right? He is going to be caught, and he realizes this time that he's foreseen has come, that the person who needs to die to keep the rebellion alive is him. And if that's where we're going for the climax of his story. And, I feel like kind of in the lore of Star Wars, and I think what they've been building, Mothma's going to take over his network up to a point. I don't think she's going to start over and entirely rebuild a network. If you look at Rebels, Bail's got one going too. Maybe Luthen's attached to that. Maybe Bail's taking orders from Luthen too, or maybe those cells are going to come together. Those groups are going to come together. But I really do feel like, there's a possibility that this scene is here to remind us that Luthen's vulnerable and he might not make it out of season 1, and what choices are going to be involved in that.
Yeah, he's a bit of his own MacGuffin.
Yeah.
No, I really love that. And for someone who wants some connection, wants Saw to connect with others, and then also at the same time is willing to sacrifice. I love what you're saying of him possibly only being some of the only one with information that's vital to it, which means he might have to sacrifice to protect it. But also he goes, Clea's like, I don't know his password.
Yeah. Or does he send Mothma the password,
Yeah.
And that's, a part of where we're left with Mothma of like, you're not just the money anymore. You're the holder of the keys. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So let's talk about comedy and whimsy, because I also thought there was more of that this episode. What were some favorite moments for you?
So outside of just quoting Freddie and Dewey, everything about that, just the chuckles, the energy about it, the lines. I'll be saying that stuff for a long time, and I'm forever thankful to both of them for introducing Tootsie 2 to me and Biggie Dinner, because that's what I say every time I go to 7-Eleven. But I do want to highlight, Cyril, who's terrifying, but also has this undercurrent of comedy that is something else to me. And I think there is a little bit of comedy of frustration, comedy of futility, part of what's going on with him, right? That dropped FaceTime call was hilarious to me. Just the way it's played from the beginning, because it's serious. And look at his face. And again, he is I think Cyril is terrifying. I don't know exactly where he's going to land, including the stuff he last week with Miro, everything about him. But just the comedy of it, the cutting, the miscommunication, the no, I'm on Morlano. I'm not talking about that. And even the moment when they get a clarity and the sergeant's like, oh, hey, so this machine stopped. That's going to give us a lot of time to talk. Yeah. So anyways, they want us to talk. It's like, just effing say the words, man. Just say the words. And I loved everything about it. And then just his mom listening. The mystery of your former triumphs has been vanquished. I can sleep peacefully now. What does she say? I love it.
So cruel of like, this is the kind of just doofus you've been hanging out with. That was your great triumph on Morlana 1 when things were firing on all cylinders. This is the level of person you were engaging with. Cool. Great. Yeah. So vicious, so mean. And the call was really, really funny, right? And it's kind of harkening back to the beginning in a way of when we were introduced to Cyril. his level of rigidity is funny. His persnicketyness, right? Of adding some extra, just flair to his outfit,
Yeah.
And it kind of it harkened back to that, where his rigidity was funny, of like Mosk is kind of not understand, just trying to give him some information that he like, and not understanding that his entire identity and world is caught up in this information.
Yeah. Something special.
Yeah, and then just the actual comedy of the call, right? I love when Mosk has established that he doesn't have much time and he has vital information.
Yes.
and Cyril's like, and then Mosk takes some time to just kind of tell Cyril how he's doing, which Cyril clearly does not give, a carabast about. When Mosk has been a bit rugged for me lately, but fist up, we're marching onwards, and like, it's such a just like, oh wow, it's so real, it's so human, and the fact that Cyril is selfish and doesn't give a damn is very human and very funny.
What I loved about this scene too, it's maybe unintentional comedy, but we're talking about these big themes, and then everyone will point out correctly that a good villain is the hero of their own story, right? Think of the Melshi Cassian scene. Think of all the things going on there. Now think of these two bumbling friends here. They're trying to find hope as well, and they both think they've found it, or they're on till morning. It just to see Cyril this moment, it's like he's like, man, the clouds have been. I've been listening to Force Center lately. They've been talking about the dark clouds, but I'm finding hope. He thinks he's got there. And he's got his only buddy going. Things are, things are okay, but I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Yep. And they are almost Abbott and Costello like a little bit in physical appearance, and without going too over the top, they're pretty close to a who's on first conversation about where Andor is. Like, we understand what Mosk is trying to say, of like, there's been talk back and forth to Coruscant about him going back to Ferrix, but Mosk am on Morlana 1 and getting Cyril is the, absolutely hilariously frustrated straight person just going, just tell me where he bleeping is.
And then my best year family, and he's like looking at his mom, and he's like, get out of here. It's not my family, it's my mom.
Yeah, so I'm totally with you on that one. Going back to the aliens, the Caridian, there's a couple lines I wanted to highlight. When Cassian and Melshi first run by, Dewey has a little whoa. They're really upset. They're really trucking. Look at them go. The little whoa is really funny. The kind of joke that Dewey makes to Frida of better fishing on land these days. Hey,
yes.
That one cracked me up. And I'm with you. No biggie dinner tonight like past times, Freedy. Man, my anniversary is coming up, and we've got reservations, and we're gonna have a biggie dinner. And quoting this alien, quoting Dewey at a nice restaurant. It's biggie dinner time.
Look, I'm someone who, this is 100% true story. One time at Del Taco, I ordered my meal. They handed it to me, and they said, "You all enjoy that." So I'm gonna say I'm having a biggie dinner at Del Taco.
Biggie dinners all around. This was kind of a darker one, but it didn't make me laugh. The Imperial who is telling Dedra Miro about the funeral, right? In saying they'll want a permit. They know we won't allow it. They like to keep asking. They're building a list of grievances. There is something about him being so dismissive about it. There's this contrast to the spirit of freedom and the spirit of fighting, and like the contrast between rebellion and pushing against red tape, right? Darkly funny to me.
Oh, everything about that, I forget the actor's name. He's Rhaegar Targaryen in Game of Thrones later in the show, season 6 or 7 or wherever the flashbacks are. He's great because he's capturing this. He's so inept. He's so just the early scene with Blevin. You want the hotel? I want the promotion. I know it doesn't have money touch. He's such like the actual face of the rebellion, of the Imperials on the ground, and it's so pathetic, right? It's just, And there's truth to what he's saying, and it's dangerous. Like, you're right. It's dark comedy indeed of just like what they're doing there and what he's planning on doing. But there's something so wonderfully inept about him that even Miro's like, you dummy. Do you not see the big picture?
Yeah. Yeah. He's seen it in this. Of course, my power can't be questioned. What is a list of grievances going to do? Well, probably cause a rebellion eventually, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Another area that was, bittersweet, but absolutely hilarious to me is the scene where Brasso gets talked into staying over, having a sleepover with B2 Emo.
B2.
And Brasso's telling him, like, well, you got to come to my apartment because I got to work in the morning in my place and it's time to go. The way B2 Emo says, I'm charging. That was hilarious by itself. But then Brasso saying, you've been there all day. It's about mourning. It is sad. Many of us have become huge fans, not only of B2 Emo, but his little doggy bed charging port. Yep. But it's another great place where the absurd becomes profound, because how many of us on social media are talking about having a hard time getting up, wanting to just be in on the couch, just feeling like we desperately need as much time as possible, like to recharge our batteries, to get back out there and keep fighting, right? And this sad, weird little droid is just kind of representing all that, right? I'm charging, you've been there all day is a total, like, I just need to nap. And somebody being like, you haven't got out of bed in 3 days. What do you mean you need to nap? Yeah. Come on,
Yeah. B2 Emo is us the last 2-3 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So I absolutely love that. Any other moments of comedy or whimsy you wanted to discuss?
No, I mean, it really was an episode chock full of them, though. So I was thankful for that.
Yeah. The only other one that didn't make me laugh is, again, a dark comedy because it's a very serious scene, but Mothma and Vel, Mothma literally with her hair down with wine talking about this worrying, condition that her daughter's in. The line about Vel's like, oh, did Perrin, talk her into doing this? And Monson, no, he's strangely open-minded on this topic.
Yeah. Oh, Perrin. Even when you're not there, Perrin, you're being Perrin.
Yeah. The one time I'd maybe like you to be closed-minded.
Yeah.
You're open-minded.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, world galaxy's worst husband. I'm sure there's a competition for that. All right. Did you have a favorite Luthen line or noise?
I think it was just the line when he's frisked and he's like, put it down or give it back. I thought that was great. Just kind of like that, like, what are you doing here, kid? I love that line. And I also kind of liked some of his blank stares to Saw as he's mulling all the hard truths over.
Yeah. I loved it when he's like, oh, we'll play this game. It's Tubes.
That was great. Tubes, he's my man.
It's Tubes. That's a winner. There's a, he's saying basically that he thinks Saw is a little bit of a loose cannon, and he says, I don't know what you'll do.
Yeah.
That was great. And then there's a competition for great Luthen lines. You already mentioned it, but when he's doing his great acting job, pretending, I'm just a normal guy on a shuttle run.
Yeah.
When they tell him there's a lot of piracy in the air, it's like, oh, thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
I'll be safe.
I also like when he's like, hey, I'm just a one-man show over here. Like, that's how I sometimes feel in my whole career. It's just a one-man show over here. Just trying to get through it here. Give me a moment.
Yeah. Is there anything then that we haven't touched on that you wanted to?
No, I definitely think, and I'll say it right here in kind of final moments here. It's like I mentioned up top, this didn't necessarily hit me as my favorite episode up top. It's still going to take a lot to get through on rewatches when I'm doing a big, cheerful, hopeful run through Andor. That stuff still stands for me, but even discussing and finding what's there and seeing where it connects to the other things in Star Wars. This is why I love having these discussions, because this episode has a lot of value, and I was happy to dive in more.
Yeah, me too. You know what? There was one other line that I really liked about Mothma and Vel. This was actually, I didn't hear it at all when I watched it without the subtitles. I only picked it up in subtitles. When Lita is happy to see Vel and they're hugging, Vel asks her what she's been doing, and Lita's like, well, practicing the chant. And Vel says, how's that going? Which she's trying to stay, connected to her by being the aunt that Lita actually likes.
Yeah.
But we, the audience, know that Vel hates that chant. That was, how's that going? Like, that's the best that she could come up with. It's pretty great.
Yeah.
Pretty great. All right. We are heading into the final episode of Andor next week. Do you have any predictions or hopes?
We said last week, I'll say it again, all roads lead to Ferrix. I love what you're saying about the funeral being the emotional center, but also kind of the center of this, where it's all leading to. We still got some stuff on course on Indeed. It would be great if Mothma shows up on Ferrix. Everyone just shows up. No, I think we're getting to whatever the final confrontation will be here. One big, you mentioned, I hadn't thought about it too much. It's like, what happens I with Krieger and whatever happens, but I imagine it will be off camera and still matter to the characters that we know. But we'll see how they deal with that, if at all.
Yeah. No, I think I'm very curious to see if everything just happens as planned with Krieger. I don't think that we'll see it. Unless one of our characters gets caught up in it. But there's that question of Krieger. There's the question of Mothma in Lita, which I think became even more complex with Lita's interest in Chandrilan tradition, and a lot of what we're talking about letting people make choices. That's what Mothma is fighting for. That's what Luthen is fighting for. And that's why I'm really intrigued of if Mothma's like, is your parent, I think this Chandrilan tradition of marrying young is not necessarily the best life choice, but what a position for Mothma to be in. If Lita comes to her and like, our relationship isn't good. You're never here for me, Mom. And this is what I want. And Lita's in her face saying, this is what I want. Is Mothma going to say, well, I'm going to respect her choice and tell myself that it's for the greater good as well?
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, it's a really, really big one to see how all that comes together. I think for me, a big part of the show is, are any of these characters, besides Cassian and Mothma, heading into season 2? I think there's a possibility that the funeral showdown on Ferrix is a bloodbath,
Yeah. I fear for some of them, Cinta and Vel included. I really do. Some big ones I don't, but I'm with you on them.
Yeah,
Brasso. Brasso.
Brasso. I'm just absolutely holding hope in my heart for Brasso and B2 Emo.
Yeah.
But I do think it's interesting that Luthen might not make it past this first season, and how does he pass off what he knows. I think that connection that's been made between Dedra and Cyril, right? It's not, Cyril and Cassian do seem to be sort of connected. They even had another mirror scene where they both go to get some money for the next play, and there's been lots of that. But I'm so curious. I could see Cyril continuing into the next season, and we follow him on his journey. Does he make it to the Empire the way Cassian makes it to the Rebellion? I think that's possible. I kind of don't think my instinct is Dedra's not making it past this. I'd be happy to be wrong because I love the character. But I do think there's a really interesting thing where these characters have their eye on the big picture, the big battle, and it's the personal that's going to come home to them. That's what's happening with the funeral, right? It isn't a big battle for the freedom of Ferrix. It's a funeral. Yeah. And Mothma's choice isn't about, should I send 30 rebels to die? It's what's right for my daughter. And I think with Dedra, I think we're on track of something else. Of her eye is on the prize of being, the hero of the Empire. And I think Cyril's a threat to her.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if she stops him from doing anything. Cassian or just, Yeah. There's something in her tale of your obsessions becoming what destroys you. Yeah.
And final thing for me is I love that we had the reminder of Nemec's manifesto. And there's a part of me of like, is one of the final scenes, Cassian having gone through a lot of loss, but being set on his path to fight the good fight for the cause. And
Yeah.
Just it's a sad Cassian listens to Nemec's Manifesto podcast.
I was going to say, that's not even the end credit. There's no end credit music. It's just the Manifesto playing.
Yeah. Oh, did Nemec, well, we know he recorded something about Cassian, right?
Yes.
In Cassian's Soul. So are we going to hear that? That's exciting to me.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm clearly excited for a lot in the final season, as I know you are and all the listeners are as well. We try to end fun. What merch would you want based on these episodes?
Well, we need Dewey and Freedy. We need these figures. We need a scene, a cinema scenes set. We need them in Funko form. We need them in plush form. We need them everywhere. And the fishing nets with you could actually fire a little action. You drop it a little goo that you get with the package, and then.
I was going to say, this is definitely the first Star Wars action figure where I need goo. I need the wet nets to be wet.
Yes, you do.
Yeah. I have one B2 Emo action figure. I'm probably going to get two so I can take them out of the package. But I need deluxe B2 Emo that comes with charging bed for sure.
100%.
Yeah. And I think in one of the copious interviews with the creators about Andor, Tony Gilroy had said that a Fondor Hallcraft ship toy is coming.
Yeah.
Whether that's Lego or who knows what else. So we got a ship coming. We need a playset, right? And here's the playset. We've seen it many episodes, but the playset I deeply want from Andor is Mon Mothma's sunken living room conversation pit action playset.
With additional rain you can sprinkle on the windows. Yeah.
Yep. And you can have all your action figures sit in there, even if they aren't articulated and their knees don't bend. They can just sit on that conversation pit, legs sticking straight out.
It's like the great joke at the end of Waiting for Guffman, Christopher Guest's first mockumentary there, where the remains of the day action figures.
Yep. Yeah. My Dinner with Andre, Dollhouse. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. Oh, great stuff. Great stuff. All right, Ken, you want to let people know where they can find us?
I absolutely do. We are the Force Center Podcast, and we are on Twitter at Force Center Pod. We're on Instagram and YouTube. We have a call to action going on over at YouTube as we try to grow our subscriber base there. We're trying to get to 6,500 subs. So go over there and sub if you have not. We have a live Q&A coming next week on the 23rd. We also have more additional content we're preparing for the YouTube channel. So don't miss it over there. We can also be found on the Facebook page at Force Center Podcast. Podcast available in a lot of spots, including iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. Merch is available at tpublic.com/user/Force Center. And you can support us directly at patreon.com/Force Center. You can find me at Ken Napzok. Go to my website, kennapzok.com, for more information on things I do, like my sports card ASMR channel or my music show, Pop Rockin' Radio on Mixcloud. Joseph, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on social media. I am still on Twitter for the time being. Also, Instagram is a great place to find me. You can just search for at Joseph Scrimshaw. I'm also on TikTok and Mastodon. And of course, while you are subscribing to Force Center on YouTube, if you're so inclined, you could stop by my YouTube channel. It is Joseph Scrimshaw. You just search for that, and it will pop up. Also, it's listed at the bottom of the Force Center page. I am building that up by doing some more short films. Thanks to everyone who's watched a short film with Ken and Mark Ellis in it, Peace Fight. There's more of that coming. So if you're interested, please do subscribe. That is it for now. As always, we like to share our thoughts, our opinions. Andor is a show that has great complexity. So probably good to remind you, as always, that we're analyzing our thoughts, our opinions. It gets into some heavy areas with tradition, with politics, with morality, all sorts of heavy stuff. So a reminder, as always, that we are talking about what we see, and we understand that there'll be many different opinions out there, and we respect that. So for now, for myself, for Ken, for Biggie Dinners across the galaxy, this has been the Andor Report.